Does the state of Tennessee wish to make or give a closing argument?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead, please.
Kennedy Hoyle should be 3 years old. She should be growing, learning, getting into things, driving her mom Danielle and her grandma April crazy. She'd be too big for this car seat, but she's forever frozen in time, not even 2 days old, along with her mother, Danielle. They're gone because of that man, Brandon Isabelle. He shot Danielle 5 times and left her in a ditch. He took baby Kennedy, drove her to the river, and tossed her in the cold, dark water. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard all the proof that you're going to hear in this case. You've now heard the law given to you by the judge. You have 5 counts, and they're listed up on the screen for you. Now, you'll see in your jury instructions that there are lesser included offenses for each count. That is not a menu. You don't pick and choose. You have to start with the top charge. So in count 1, that'll be first-degree murder. Everyone has to agree that he's not guilty of first-degree murder before you move to a lesser count. Now, let's talk about count 1 and count 2. Talked about in voir dire elements, what the state has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. You have count 1, which is premeditated first-degree murder as to the death of Danielle Hoyle. You also have count 2, which is premeditated first-degree murder as to the death of Kennedy Hoyle. The elements are the same. First, the state has to prove that Danielle and Kennedy were unlawfully killed, that the defendant acted intentionally, he intended to kill them, and he acted with premeditation. Now, in your jury instructions, intentionally is defined. It wasn't an accident. The defendant, he pointed that gun at Danielle and fired it at her, intending to kill her. He took Kennedy by the leg and threw her into the river. He intended to kill her. Now let's talk about premeditation. You have the full definition in your jury instructions. And you notice that it talks about reflection and judgment, but that there doesn't have to be a specific amount of time with regards to forming the intent of the purpose to kill. So, how did the state for counts 1 and 2 prove premeditation? The planning. Think about everything that you've heard over the course of several days. The defendant, he filed for divorce January 27th of 2022, mere days before he killed Danielle and Kennedy. What else? Kennedy is born January 31st of 2022. The defendant doesn't sign her birth certificate. Then we move to January 30th of 2022. And you heard Special Agent Garner tell you that they went through the defendant's phone. And what did they find? Web searches. 2 days out from the murder, And the defendant is searching Jared in the wedding ring section. And then he had some additional searches. Can all bullets be traced back to the exact gun that fired them? Can you tell what gun a bullet came from? Now let's move to February 1st of 2022. And you heard Special Agent Garner tell you that he was able to tell the defendant's movements throughout that day. And earlier that day, he's on Mart Road. And you heard Investigator Byers tell you that Mart Road is along Lakeview. And it's an easy turn to miss in the dark. And if you notice on the map, you take Lakeview and you miss Mart Road, next turn, Sedgwick and Levi. Dark, desolate, deserted. Now the defendant told us in his confession, and his GPS told us, he met Danielle at the MAPCO. And why? He told her he had baby clothes to give her. And what was found in the defendant's white Chevy Malibu? Baby clothes. And then we get to the scene. Levi and Sedgwick. He gets Danielle to meet him at that MAPCO. He convinces her to drive down Levi and Sedgwick. No lights, dark, quiet, raining. And he tells us in his statement that he had car trouble. Think about the scene at Levi and Sedgwick. Danielle's Chevy Cruze parked on the wrong side of the road. And what did the defendant tell us? She got in position to shine her headlights to help him out with his car trouble. And what did he do? He walked up to her Chevy Cruze. He opened the passenger door and he fired. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 shots into that car, striking Danielle 5 times in the face and head. Premeditation. Now by 9:23, according to his GPS, he's moving on. He's leaving the area of Levi and Sedgwick. And who does he have with him? He has baby Kennedy. And while Kennedy's in the car, and he has left her mother dead in a ditch on the side of the road, he's covering his tracks. He's sending text messages to Danielle, knowing that she'll never answer. Now, he's been driving around. We're at about an hour. Kennedy's been in the car. And he stops off at home to get out of his murder outfit, those Adidas slides, that windbreaker-like jacket, the black and the greenish blue. Takes the time to hang that jacket in the closet. Comes back out, gets back in his car, and what does he do? He drives to Mud Island, all the way from Cordova, passing numerous exits, numerous houses, places. All that time, could have made a different choice. But he went, and he drove on Island Drive to get to Mud Island, to that boat ramp, and he took baby Kennedy by the leg and threw her into the Wolf River. Count 4, we're going a little bit out of order, is aggravated child neglect. And you can see the elements for aggravated child neglect, what the state has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. That the defendant knowingly neglected Kennedy so as to adversely affect her health and welfare, that it resulted in serious bodily injury, and that Kennedy was 8 years of age or less. And there you have the definition of knowingly, as well as serious bodily injury, all defined in your jury instructions. What did the defendant do with Kennedy? He took her down to the boat ramp at Mud Island. In the dark, in the cold, in the rain, out of her car seat. And even if you believe that he didn't throw her in the river, he just left her by the river and she somehow managed to go into the river, he is still guilty of murder and perpetration of aggravated child neglect. Serious bodily injury or death. Adversely affect the health and welfare. He left her where she could fall into the river in the cold and the dark and the rain. And as you see, that goes hand in hand with count 3, and that's the murder and perpetration of aggravated child neglect. So in that count, the difference is the defendant didn't have to intend the killing. He had to intend the aggravated child neglect. Last count, especially aggravated kidnapping. You can see the elements. What do we know? The defendant, after shooting her mother, takes Kennedy, takes her from Levi and Sedgwick, drives around Cordova, goes to his parents' house, goes all the way down to the river, and kills her. The state has to prove identity. How do we know that the defendant, Brandon Isabelle, is responsible for each and every one of these crimes? He told us. You listened to his interview with police. He told us. He told us exactly what he did. We have the GPS that Special Agent Garner went through methodically, telling us all the points of where he was located throughout that day and night. His phone, a silent witness to those murders. The text messages. And you'll have those text messages between the defendant and Artesia. They're going back and forth throughout the night. And why is that? Is it because they're in two different locations? They're not together? And there's the shell casings. The defendant, he told us, he shot Danielle with his 9mm. What do we find? 9mm shell casings in the passenger seat of Danielle's car, 2 in front of her car, and a loaded 9mm magazine in the defendant's white Chevy Malibu in the center console. And he told us what he did with Kennedy. That he took her to the boat ramp, took her by the leg, and threw her into the river. And what did he say in his statement? It didn't go as far as the gun. And what did officers find on that boat ramp? Kennedy's baby cap. Why'd he do it? What's the motive? You'll notice that is not an element that the state has to prove. But it's pretty clear, the motive here. And it's Artesia. The defendant wanted to be with Artesia. You heard her testimony. You've heard the text messages. She didn't want to have to deal with another child on top of her child, on top of the child the defendant already had, another mother in the mix. And so he came up with this plan. And he never wanted that baby. And you can see in that text message that he had sent to Danielle, what does he say? I can't be a father to that kid right now, Danielle. If you love me like you say you do, then let's end our mistake, Danielle. But Danielle wanted to be a mother to that little girl. That little girl wasn't a mistake. Now let's fast forward to January 30th of 2022. And you heard the text messages between Artesia and the defendant. And this is in the late night of January 30th. What we know is that Danielle's already at the hospital, and she's in labor, about to give birth to baby Kennedy. And what is the defendant texting? He's texting to wifey, Artesia, I love you. Baby, say it back. You doing this to me in a time like this. And what does Artesia respond? Tell her have a safe delivery. I'll talk to you when y'all get the results. Then we move in to those early morning hours, right around the time that Danielle is giving birth to Kennedy. And what is the defendant doing? He's still texting Artesia. He's still sending her messages over and over again. And what is Artesia's response? I'm going to make this simple. If it's yours, build that bond. Get to know her as a woman because she loves you as well. I won't need no response. Silence will answer that for me. If it's not, we still need space to take this relationship slow. She's slipping away. His perfect woman is slipping away. And what does he do? While his baby has just been born, he's still sending text message novels to Artesia, professing his love. And they're still going back and forth. And he says to her, this is the worst I've acted over a female. Never wanted somebody so bad. You knew this day was coming. Why wait until now and all this love and time? And then what do? That early morning, after Kennedy is born, they agree to meet up. And where does the defendant suggest? Where you want to meet at? Our river spot? Now we're at February 1st of 2022. 7:58, the defendant gets back to his home on Lathbury. Then he's gone again at 8:05, and he's dressed to kill. According to the GPS data, he's at the MAPCO at 8:32 to 8:51 p.m. And he says that in his statement to Sergeant Boyd and Sergeant Wimbush. He met Danielle at the MAPCO. And we found the baby clothes in the Malibu. Now we're moving on. Between 9:02 and 9:23, GPS has him at Levi and Sedgwick, and he admits to going there. And during this time, he and Artesia are still going back and forth. And you'll notice that from 9:04 to 9:22, he stops texting Artesia. All those blue messages, Artesia. Green messages, the defendant. And what is he doing in that gap in time, that 9:04 to 9:22? He's shooting Danielle 5 times in the head and the face and taking her sweet, precious baby and driving away. You see what's left behind. Danielle and those 9mm shell casings. And he drags her, and he tells us how he drags her out of that vehicle by the shirt. And look at her clothes. Look at how her jacket is pulled off her body. He killed Danielle. He left her in a ditch. He's driving around with Kennedy in his seat. He's texting with Artesia, and he takes the time to put in a food order. Cheeseburger, no onions, blue Kool-Aid. And what did Artesia tell us? That she stopped by Dixie Queen that night. And what did we find in her car? Looks a bit like a blue Kool-Aid. Now, we're back at 8702 Lathbury. He gets there at 10:24. You can see what he's wearing. You see those Adidas slides, those black socks. Goes inside, takes the time to hang up his jacket, changes his clothes, and he's gone again at 10:29, holding that blue bag. Baby Kennedy in his white Chevy Malibu. And what do they find in the trunk of that white Chevy Malibu? Those Adidas slides. And looks a bit like that blue bag he was carrying on the Ring camera footage. Where's he headed? Island Drive. And how do we know that that's the defendant? You heard Lieutenant Stanley testify that they had license plate reader hits on his tag going over the A.W. Willis Bridge. They were able to look back at camera footage from the real-time crime center, and they see that white Chevy Malibu driving up and down Island Drive. 10:59 to 11:20. And all that time, from leaving Levi and Sedgwick to 9:23, all the way to Island Drive, could have made a different choice. He had every opportunity to make a different choice. And we're at 10:54, right before he gets to Island Drive, and he's texting with Artesia. And what does he tell her? He tells her he just left the house. But we know he's down on Mud Island, getting rid of the last obstacle between him and Artesia. And at 11:13, right before, he takes baby Kennedy and throws her into the river. He wants to know when Artesia's going to be around. 11:20 to 11:27. It's at the boat ramp, GPS. And he says that he threw the baby by the leg. And you'll have his interview. Notice that Sergeant Wimbush, he says he threw the baby by the arm, and it's the defendant that corrects him and says by the leg. Sergeant Boyd asks, how far into the water did you throw her? And his response, it wasn't far. It didn't go as far as the gun. And now, baby Kennedy is in the Wolf River. Danielle is in a muddy ditch on Levi and Sedgwick, being discovered by Officer Sutton. And what's the defendant doing? He's at Walgreens, buying stuffed animals, roses for Artesia. And writing a card professing his love and talking about raising Kennedy, who he knows he just threw in the Wolf River. And how do we know? Because we have video. We have GPS. And the defendant told us. Now, while we're at the Walgreens, what's going on? Texting Artesia. And what did she say? She said he shared his location, which wasn't normal for them. And she called him out on it in the text messages. And where did she say that location was? Walgreens. Is he trying to set up his alibi? Because he's also out there in the parking lot, and you can see it in the video, sits there for a while. And what's happening? Prior to arriving at Walgreens, he's sending text messages, once again, to Danielle. 11:39. Show me Kennedy. I'm going to take her tomorrow. after, not half an hour before, throwing that baby into the Wolf River. 12:02. Give her a kiss for me. Just miss her. That's all. Love y'all. At 12:13, sends Artisha another text. Now he's on the way to Walmart. And what does he tell Artisha? I want to cuddle tonight. I ain't slept with you in a week. And then we arrive at Walmart. How do we know? GPS, video, and the defendant tells us. And he tells Sergeant Wimbush and Sergeant Boyd. He left the car seat at the Walmart. And Officer Blake, that's where he finds it. And what does he find? Finds the car seat. And then you heard from Officer Walker, a mitten. A matching set. The riverbank and Walmart. Then he goes to Stacy Road. And again, his GPS puts him there. Artisha puts him there. He's coordinating meeting up with her. And what is found in his Chevy Malibu? An empty gun holster, a 9mm magazine, and gloves with the cockleburr. And then by 1:07 a.m., he and Artisha are back at his house at Lathbury. Let's talk about the gun. There's been a lot of talk about Artisha had a .40 and a Smith & Wesson, and there was .40 caliber rounds found at Levi and Sedgwick. You saw how many rounds were found of various calibers at Sedgwick. You saw, when you zoom into that picture, that street sign that was covered in bullet holes. You heard Investigator Byers' video, and he said that jingling noise that you could hear were shell casings. But what shell casings were found in Danielle's passenger seat? 9mm. What shell casings were found just up from the car? 9mm. What magazine was found in the defendant's center console of his white Chevy Malibu? 9mm. And if you look closely, from in front of the Chevy Cruze, Hornady shell casing. In the passenger side of Danielle's vehicle, Hornady 9mm shell casing. And in the defendant's car, live rounds, Hornady 9mm. And what did the defendant tell us he did with the gun? He threw it in the river. What did we find? We didn't find the gun, but we found his gun box. And what was in that? More magazines for a 9mm. What gun did we find? We found Artisha's gun, a .40 Smith & Wesson. It wasn't missing. It was right there. And then you look at the scene at at Levi and Sedgwick. And you can see, and those are placards 12 and 13, those are those 2 shell casings from a 9mm in their Hornady brand. And what did the defendant tell us in his statement about what happened? After he shot Danielle, the car rolled. And you can see a pile of glass fairly close to those 9mm shell casings. And you can see Danielle's car in the distance, as if it, after he's had some time to reflect, oh, Danielle was an accident. Ladies and gentlemen, you heard Dr. Collier. Danielle was shot 5 times. In the head and in the face. This was not an accident. This was a premeditated execution. Then we have the DNA, the Adidas slide, seen on the defendant that night in that Ring camera video, found in the trunk of his white Chevy Malibu. And what did he tell officers about that during the interview? He said that Danielle's blood would be on the slides. He even specified which one, the left. And which one had Danielle's DNA, according to Agent Walzak? The left. And then he sits through that interview the entire time wearing those white socks with Danielle's blood on them. And you saw that he had a pair of black socks over them. And that blood had seeped through to those white socks. But Officer Carlisle found them. They went to the TBI to be tested, and once again, Danielle's blood on those socks that were on the defendant's feet. Ladies and gentlemen, the term victim is used a lot. But Danielle and Kennedy were more than that. Danielle was a mom. She was 27 years old. She was a girl mom. She had 9-year-old Jariah and her new baby, Kennedy. And then there's Kennedy, who will forever be, frozen in time, less than 2 days old, never getting the chance to grow up. Danielle's mistake was getting involved with that man. Danielle and Kennedy. They'll never do so many things. And it's because of what the defendant, Brandon Isabelle, did. Ladies and gentlemen, the state asks that you find the defendant guilty of every single charge of the indictment.